Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about the, once again, I talked about that um, exclusionary rule provision and about the line, including endorsements and the 180-degree flat line, and a telepathic answer and a telepathic angel answer. And there was something about, the exclusionary rule that involved, the alphanumerics of the word, the two words. I knew it pronounced compass. I call it the symbol, like a telepathic, holy miracle, spirit of adoption. I call it many things other than just the symbolic representation, including the identifying. I don't know if I'd really call it a code, but the 0 point E on a basic calculator that once it goes beyond the programmed engineering for its functions and modes on a basic calculator, it shows up as 0 point E. And like with Texas Instruments calculator involving calculus being the limit of the software engineered program with the limit of calculus, anything beyond that would require, beyond the program would show up as EE. And I was like, throwing that thought towards that direction because, as a matter of fact, the alphanumerics of 58 automatically with the symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, being that any and every combination of the symbolic representation on the C Holy Miracle PTIS, a new accomplice, is like equating to like 58, okay? And that would be the 0 E joined together with the 0 E, excuse me, the OE, the CE, and the AE, and likewise in combination with all those numbers, and then those numbers in addition in combination with each of those, totaling 58, okay? And I had mentioned the exclusionary rule provision involving something about the transaction and value of whether if that actually was like an international prejudice of actually knowing how to identify maybe what usury and like Deceptive Trades Act might maybe make available in the way of, I'd mentioned that if usury and national deficits, like a Deceptive Trades Act, would be only an unexperienced, being that most people in the bank normally do not suggest any reality of consciousness of international financial management or degree level of using, even if they know, even using what they know sometimes, and the significance and maybe when and where and what's involved with actually accomplishing that level of, like, knowing that if the word is usury and predominantly if it's sometimes could be like a first time for an entire lifetime, if not generations of families or whatever the case may be, even places of business, in the way that if it really gets to the point of what usury means, if it's really a name attached to an endorsement, okay, on the backside of like normally an employment check, there's other forms of payments involving insurance, or sometimes considered, whether it's annuity or a settlement or a claim or reimbursement or whatever the case may be, likewise in addition or whatever the case may be. Yeah, the thing with this is about with the endorsement, if any privilege is attached to it in that way, whether that is total neglect by the endorser, the endorsee, or if there's like the accusation of what and the person endorsing it would normally be the name on the front side of the check, that not normally being a perception of whether or not a registered charity or a certificate deposit would go maybe a little bit further of what maybe some unexperienced, not necessarily having degree level of what and how constitutional law might be used in that way, is a privilege in a way, yet and still in all, also having the amending factors that would actually dictate a little bit something about the exclusionary rule provision in the way of what usury or even deceptive trades might mean in the way of the exclusionary rule, even with like sovereign immunity and governmental amnesty. And I was like reading and studying quite a bit about that because it was something on my mind. And I'm sitting there looking at the U.S. dollar because I looked at that symbolic representation and just went on and on. And it's kind of like, hey, that's the McDonald's coffee cup hot cafe thing. Anyway, I don't want to get off into that. I was like thinking about the flat line and the exclusionary rule provision and the endorsement. And with the 0.E, something about it's like joining together, given that like appearance of the symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, and having that knowledge of like Texas Instruments specific calculator I had at the time, and my memory of it, reflecting anything beyond calculus, beyond the programmable functions and mode by the software engineering of that calculator would show up as the EE. And I had that thought and like a knowledge of that going beyond the software engineered programming to like the master and designer, or would need more than just what was available in that way, being the EE. So ultimately it came to the horizontal line, the flat line, 180 degree flat line. And I was thinking, hey, like I have a knowledge about maybe that's where it goes, in the way of maybe I haven't looked at, when I started really getting into looking a little bit like Roosevelt New Deal Act, or the Sarbanes and Oxley Sarbanes and Oxley and the financial instruments and SOX compliance, maybe in a way about the exclusionary rule. And I hadn't really thought about that part about it until now, or maybe even some similarities of what the federal communications mean to federal, state, and local authorities. And I had mentioned something about that 1951 copyright version of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia that shows that negative 3, the square root to the -3. Okay, and I was like really getting into the thing about the 13 stars and the bicentennial quarter and 13 stars and the 13 colonies of what is normally identified as history, and the sanitation ponds, the DuPonts, even escrow, in the way of what escrow means to maybe importing and exporting, or what it means to tariff in that way of importing and exporting of like international law. And what having fair use seems to be of access easements, that seems to be so very much a big deal in international law, of whether or not if having fair use is only just a suggestion of what intellectual is, of what normally anyone who is in possession of like intellectual property for the lifespan and duration. And if truthfully duration is the issue, or the lifespan of what intellectual is to access easements, can be like really a real not funny issue, in a way of what maybe human capital might suggest in the way of exclusionary rule provision. And I was like thinking about that horizontal line, that flat line, and what that means to like oscillation and cyclic frequency and units of measurement, and something of like urban and suburban in the way of like the flat line means, or above and below like flat plane surfaces, or what a 2D ISO 3D is to 56:10, or even a Roe v. Wade thing that I discussed like on my YouTube.com channel, Wade ASV PRIDDY. That's Wade ASV PRIDDY. Wade ASV pretty, okay? YouTube.com. Anyway, yeah. So I was looking at that halo. I call it the halo side of the U.S. $1 above the pyramid, the Inuit compass. And I was just now really thinking, it's not the first time, but it's like the symbol ultimately got to an automatic 58, and every possible combination of letters ultimately got to what didn't pop up automatically as a hot cafe, although it is a calibrated styrofoam cup of what was in McDonald's, the hot cafe thing, yeah. And those are every possible letter of alphanumerics that equate to that. And truthfully, I don't like getting into the division of the nuclei, in the way of fission and fusion, involving, I don't like calling it money for the mere sake of maybe a through default by ignorance, just the assumption of what that might suggest as categorization, even a viewpoint of a potential predicted estimate option in future, identifying, not realizing what monetary might mean as a choice of terminology, or maybe naive to maybe what having fair use of managing might be involved in the way of constitutional law, or like a lot of people in the bank might not realize that normally that usury might be an automatic that's led to be believed in one way. It might not even know what maybe class action, if that's the choice of what litigation involves, in the way of even just simple taxation. I mean, if it really gets to the point of whether if the exclusionary rule is suggesting that there's not enough information to actually go beyond categorization, such as like the three aggregates M1, M2, and M3 of like a domestic, monetary, and like gross national product. I had got to the point that the halo side on that symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1 above the pyramid, a new accomplice, might necessarily be, hey, I have a knowledge of like the 0 point E, and the EE, maybe that will be where it goes from 58 would be like, 59. Automatically, that is just one line. And that's really all it needs to mean. I mean, there is the thing about the due west. And that would normally be, in most people's mind, the due west issue being like involving a compass, or maybe even, even more on a larger scale, maybe the actual degrees of during a full entire four season calendar year of what due west really means to actual degree of like change of season, in the way of what magnetism and invisible magnetic force fields in the universe actually having a polarity issue, and how it affects seasonal changes in that way. And the phrase of due west was like involved, not limited to something about Compass Bank by far, but all the names of like a lot of banks was like throwing some brains about a lot about what I'm talking about. And Compass Bank is one, Nations Bank is another, Commonwealth Bank is, and there was like a lot of other banks that were like really throwing, like really what I had read before they started like naming banks that would reflect maybe something beyond the 13 colonies, and even the 13 stars reflecting sanitation, or maybe what Commonwealth means to processing or digital processing, and what processing means to every thought, and I was even looking at the geospatial information technology, and maybe what Reader's Digest might even mean to that, based upon my perception of like geospatial information technology. I didn't really consider that, and I was looking into it in that way, not really in that way, but looking for what it's about, but there was something about the Consumer Report Price Index in the New York Stock Exchange in the way of what certain types of stock, or truthfully, or if it's like a live on air current event of like livestock, and if that's really the exclusionary rule provision in the way of like a defector, if it's really ultimately getting to like television programming and television and radio, and only the information is being provided, and everyone just accepting and possibly not know what the accusation is for not doing something about it, maybe at a higher level and degree level, to maybe if it means enough to them to progress with the most advanced brains of the universe, and here on this planet, this earth, and like getting up and staying up, and having something a little bit than entertainment that goes beyond some liquid equity, and maybe deciding when and where commerce dictates whether or not if human capital, if not a neighborhood, or urban, suburban, or some categorization, and domestic aggregates, even in whether or not if that's, you know, even including commercial, you know, how property is used, or any particular estimates, options, and futures in that way of how property is or is not used. Maybe isolating one person, one family, one household, one neighborhood, one vehicle, one car, form of transportation, or a religious venue, or entertainment venue, or what the television means in circuitry. Yeah, that way. So, you know, I was kind of like looking at all that. Anyway, so yeah, it's like, you know, automatically, you know, back to the symbolic representation on the back side of the US $1 bill, and equating to like that halo, left side of the 0 point E, the symbolic representation above the pyramid, a new accomplice. See Holy Miracle PTIS thing, the C Holy Miracle PTIS, you know, or like a telepathic birth thing, you know, spirit of adoption. It's like a King James biblical term, some telepathic, you know, mental telepathy issue. Not limited to, but yeah, you know, I'm sure it goes in this world, you know, maybe a little bit more to the degree level of like what's available, you know, right here, right now, kind of like thing on this planet thing, in that way. So, I was looking at that halo side. You know, normally it's identified that normally angels have the halo, or you know, what head of household means, in fixtures of real estate. And what really a fixture might mean, it's not that it might means, or, you know, really some haloed venue of like, you know, some head of household, some domicile, you know, haloed venue of a toilet, okay? Yeah, for real. Or what that means to Commonwealth, you know, like in saying software, storage area networks, the acronym getting into these securities and annuities, or something about the issue of like sanitation, or storage area networks, or even warehousing, and distinguishing whether or not if ergonomic participation is the issue between warehousing or like human capital, or a municipal annuity identified maybe as what type of venue a fixture is in. Normally that would even include, you know, what all that means, parked in the driveway kind of like thing, as a stationary engineer, or de facto in a way of whether or not if de facto is going to be an issue involving any type of litigation, or maybe a compliment thoroughly above the normal perception of very rarely is it heard anywhere beyond maybe General Motors. Normally General Motors and insurance normally identify certain factors, which with a lot of case precedents that I've read was predominantly when the word de facto is involved. I mean, I found it more, and really truthfully I've started focusing on General Motors predominantly with the word de facto, normally generating the issue of like insurance or compensation, whether if compensation was like a different term defining what most that might not have insurance coverage would be considered a settlement, as compared to compensation of what maybe coverage might include, in distinguishing difference of terminology, yet maybe possibly the similarities of the same value and result. Okay, is what I'm talking about. Okay, so anyway, like that in that way, what that means to ergonomics. You know, you've probably seen the commercial. You can learn a lot from a dummy, and you know, truthfully, you know, you've probably seen that. Probably also, you know, about the innovation as well. And you know, truthfully, you know, it's kind of like when innovation is enforced. Excuse me, when annotation is enforced, innovation is not a question. Okay, and you know, I was sitting there, I was like looking at that commercial. You can learn a lot from a dummy. And I was sitting there thinking about the ergonomic stuff about that. What that really means to ergonomics. You know, and I had seen that word, you know, long before, and didn't really consider it maybe something of far more significance, and maybe people might not really realize. And it's kind of like with the 13 stars on the back side of the US $1 bill and the bicentennial quarter. Not limited to the bicentennial quarter, but I'm almost for certain that that is the one of them all, the bicentennial quarter, being the 200-year celebration with the snare drum, the drummer on the back side, and the 13 stars, and the 200-year celebration of America, reflecting the 13 stars. And normally, in American history, the 13 stars not always identified in the way of what Commonwealth means to the 13 colonies, or storage area networks defined in American history as anything other than Commonwealth, the 13 colonies. Although that is terminology that is actually, it's not always easy to find, but it is like very much available, identifying that terminology in like international financial management, what Commonwealth is, to the 13 colonies. It's not always on the same page. I have seen it pretty close within 2 or 3 pages of like looking for it in that way, or something about the spelling and pronunciation. It might be pronounced the same but spelled differently, like manure involving sanitation, or not necessarily sewer, although you hear that quite a bit. And if truthfully that's really the only thing about the litigation that would suggest that if that would be the processing of what platforms mean in the way of computer architecture and programming, computer language, and embedded in encryption, and the 4 big ones: the architecture of the platform, embedded, and encryption. Or you've heard it before. The 4 corners of the earth thing are not limited to. Although you've heard the word globalization, and that's a big word as well as in international financial management, is globalization. It's phenomenally. I mean, it's so phenomenally. Like a domiciled. Yeah, head of household domicile. Yeah, like some great globalization on its own, right? Yeah, for real. Robert Half. Yeah. Robert Half technology. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the Eggman. It's like the Oracle thing, right? Yeah, ultimately deletes the rocket science, right? Boing. All right. Yeah, right. Anyway, yeah. So the 13 colonies predominantly show a lot of it about the Commonwealth. Somewhere in my mind during that time when I was looking for, I mean, I didn't really know what I was looking for, and when I thought that I did know what I was looking for, even reading some of it, I just didn't connect it. Even when I was reading it within the same periods, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, and it just didn't compute the connectivity of maybe sometimes I've said it before. I've been told out of the clear blue sky. I mean, it was so not part of the conversation. Hey Wade, you like you know what it is, right? Really, you know what it is, right? You already know. Yeah, it's kind of like hey, yeah. So like that really stuck with me, and I remembered that because I mean it was just so out of the norm. And that's really what I'm really doing is thinking about everything that I know, and making a little bit more of some issues that have led my interest to some experience that really I find significant enough to not disregard as just not going to have her do anything about it. But anyway, it's kind of like arranging quite a bit of information that way to maybe lead to what the 13 stars as compared to 13 colonies in that way, or the exclusionary rule being that halo side. And I'm just now really talking about that because I didn't even really connect something about the exclusionary rule provision or ERP technology. The ERP, what is that, 39, 16? Yeah, it's like 39, like an angel thing, yeah. Yeah, ERP, the Wyatt ERP thing, yeah. Or the exclusionary rule provision, yeah, can you believe it? Anyway, so like there's the line, okay, and ultimately it was like a Texas Instrument EE thing going beyond the programmable software engineering of like a calculator by Texas Instruments involving calculus being 92, and the Pentagon, a drummer, and a mayor, and the list goes on and on, a future, and all that good stuff. And yeah, anyway, so I started taking a lot about you know, that I've been really putting, I put very many years into it, and not even, you know, very good condition, as far as like, you know, during the time. And really, you know, it's kind of like I'm putting some time into it, and taking it serious for, like, you know, maybe considering certain issues involving maybe some of the songs I will be writing, and directing, you know, original music based on some of the information, not limited to what I'm referring to now in any kind of way. But there was something about that, the negative, the square root to the -3 in the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia, and there was like formulas that were so realistically simple, it was almost like baffling. What is that? It was like the KWD over something cubed. I think it was, I'm trying to remember what it was, cubed. And it's kind of like looking everywhere, like, what is that? What is that as compared to like variables in algebra, which normally use X and Y as variables. And I was thinking, well, you know, maybe it's a variable at a different point of view, kind of like with the K and W. And automatically it was like a television. K television, K radio, and W television, and W radio, and the D like a FBI minus CI equaling a 4, and a Mount Rushmore, and a, you know, the 4 president thing of Mount Rushmore, ultimately getting to, you know, presidents on, you know, the US dollar. Yeah, so, yeah, for real. So I kind of like, you know, kept that in mind. But anyway, it's kind of like when it got to the 3 aggregates, the M1, M2, and M3, being the domestic monetary and gross national product, and I'm just now really kind of like thinking about something about the exclusionary rule that, and that halo side on the symbolic representation of the U.S. dollar, and the 3 aggregates and the 13 stars, a difference of 10. And that seems to be like a real big deal with, like, you know, binary numbers in computer language. And the remaining 10 of, like, aggregates. I'm just now realizing something about maybe it's like really something I should really look a little bit more into with some of the information. And the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia, and that square root to the -3, you know, there's like a lot about the 3 thing. There's like the big 3 oil company. You know, there's a Mercedes-Benz 3-point emblem on their vehicles. The Father, Son, Holy Ghost, or some people might say the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, or what that really means between, you know, spherical quadrants of global geographic, National Geographics, and even something like Audi would present as the 3 intersects. In retrospect, I don't know if I would say retrospect, not necessarily maybe a Pentagon reverse 92 thing, possibly so, maybe symmetrical, asymmetrical in that way of what percentage, or if you want to call it ratio, in that way to the spherical quadrants being like the 3 intersects of Audi, as compared to it reversing, okay, like Audi being like the 3 circles, the 3 big 4 circles, creating the 3 football shaped oval type of, you know, intersects. And likewise with like National Geographics being the spherical quadrants, and like national global mapping would be the exact opposite. It would be the big 4 spherical quadrants, although the 3 circles, I've never even had a need to even consider looking for it. I think I will look for it and see if there's like 3 circles somewhere on that big old map of like you know, the world globe divided in spherical quadrants. See if there's like some 3 circle things about it that might have some real connectivity between like Audi and NASA and other things about the intersection and geographic information, global positioning systems, and what the 3 circles would mean to a spherical quadrant. I don't know if I'd really call it sectors. Spherical quadrants, you know, I'm sure everyone's seen the entire world, the globe, split up into 4 spherical quadrants like football shapes, yeah. But you know, with like the Audi symbol having the 4 big circles with the 3 intersects with the smaller spherical, they're not quadrants. I don't know if I'd call them there's 3, and they're not quadrants because there's only 3 of them. But anyway, 4's a habit, I guess. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah, spherical intersects, or, you know, Anyway, I'll have to actually find and think about what 3 spherical things looking like other than the word quadrant, right? Anyway, yeah. So anyway, so I was like thinking about that with the flat line going on the halo side of the symbolic representation of the U.S. dollar, changing the alphanumerics, what would be previously 58 to 59, like the oldest national, one of the oldest national landmarks of like North America being Highway 59, and you know, the alphanumerics 140, Highway 59, or like Pearland, Texas alphanumerics, and Holy Miracles, and yeah, all that stuff, in that way. And then, you know, there's something about, you know, Japanese being 71 in Pearland and only having, as far as I know, based upon, you know, certain places and people I've talked to and information available, that the Japanese alphabet has like only 22 in that way. And the alphabet would be like the RCA and the car thing, and the column being vertical. Obviously, you know, very much something like what, like high-rise, you know, how high-rise buildings are, you know, straight up and like, you know, vertical in that way of what Japanese, reading from top to bottom normally would be in columns, okay? So I was kind of like thinking about all that with that, what would be quadrants in that halo, from 59 would be obviously one more. And, you know, I haven't really checked the value if it's going to be really a difference between, there was like a cartoon in driver's education, and the cartoon, the word was incoherent in driver's education. That would be the cartoon reflecting an incoherence of like a combination mixture between alcohol and barbiturates, and the plus signs in the eyes would represent something, incoherence beyond normal consciousness, or even, you know, liquidable, you know, saturated, thoroughly consumed. Yeah, so the incoherence is like a whole different state of mind in that way. But anyway, that was something that I had always remembered, and something had taken place, and there was like the commercial that had just the word plus on it. Okay, you know, and I got into alphanumerics really, starting in June of 1992 because of a religious, like a spiritual, like a baptism thing, yeah, for real, okay? Anyway, yeah, not many days hence thing, okay? Anyway, yeah, so anyway, ultimately looking seriously like a international baptism, yeah, so really, for real. I mean, you know, studying the geographics and alphanumerics, I can go into that's a whole different thing, and really it's not a different thing, but yeah, I've said it before, it's like on my YouTube, and maybe if I feel like getting into it, if not having anything to say about it, it's just like, you know, oh well. Well, I've been having something to say about it, but now I'm putting some of it on YouTube now. On my channel, Wade, ASVPRIDDY, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so I was thinking about that, and that way. And that book, yeah, The Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy. It's really a telepathic spy, right? And America's Foremost Psychic Spy. We really know it's about a telepathic spy. Not limited to, but maybe in combination, you know. I don't know if that would be like the Reader's Digest version of like geographically attaching, you know, the script of what powers and principalities in high places mean. Please. Please. Another day of conflict of interest. Oh, please, man. Wait a minute. Are you saying that there's not really a minus sign in alphanumerics? You mean there's not supposed to be? You mean after 13, 14 years you start over? Could you please like not put any subtraction symbols in there, please? You mean there needs to be maybe possibly a need to start all over again? Oh yeah, man. Sure. Yeah, for real. Yeah, for real. Believe it. Yeah, for real. Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. I was thinking about all that, and how ridiculously not funny that is. Not that it is. It's just that seemingly enough. Yeah, to maybe have a perception of the potentially possibility, right? Anyway, so I was like into that the quadrant with the horizontal line being like a flat plane, even a plane horizon in like imported exported. Normally, plane horizons in economics or importing and exporting normally don't reflect maybe a flat line in the way of like a what is it with the altimeter, the plane horizon, showing an equilibrium of balance, not necessarily what would normally be identified like an altimeter in like an airplane that would reflect some degree beyond what normal perception of what equilibrium means to balance and like human reality of yeah. So anyway, so I was thinking about that plane horizon and equilibrium in a way of anyway. So like the okay, I'm gonna take a break real quick. Okay. So now I'm back. Okay. So it gets to the point of the flat horizontal line and the one vertical line being something like the citing and automatically the quoting. And normally when I hear that in legal terminology, citing and quoting is normally not limited to, I don't know if I'd use or choose the word research. Mine, if that's ultimately just an identifier for degree level or like non-degree level terminology, what research is to searching, or like when you're on a Westlaw like legal type of information involving predominantly like a lot of international law, like Westlaw thoroughly generates. Anyway, yeah. So in that way, I was like looking into that as something about the vertical part about the intersection being citing and quoting. And normally, I think of annotation, and like, not really limited to Vernon's, or the state of Texas, although state statutes annotated, and maybe even the United States codes annotated, and color codes in that way, between what color codes really seem to be, even, between the U.S. Supreme Court, predominantly what I was looking at, Southwest Court Reporter, and, the kind of like tan, beige, color of, the U.S. Supreme Court, the red, almost like a New Testament thing of the United States Codes annotation, or space exploration in a way of what like Vernon State, Texas statutes annotates mean, or what that really means, and when it matters, and if it matters, what that means to family names on a map with a black dot on a map. Yeah, so I mean, you've heard it all before, like in probably molecular composition, identified as matter, anything solid or visible that actually takes up space. And not that the word would be consume, although I've heard it phrased as that, consuming space. I don't know if I would really phrase it like that, although matter, like in space, would actually use space. Not that it's consuming. I don't know if that's really something retroactive about it. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So great. Yeah. So anyway, back to the vertical part about the quadrant with the horizontal and the plus looking sign with like the on-site target. The sighting. Even for like you've heard it before in legal terminology, field scope and range of law. And if that really is ultimately getting to the aim high Air Force, the field scope and range, what is seemingly, it's phenomenally so not funny. Just now kind of like really kind of connecting, like, the aim high Air Force thing being about the US dollar, or like a international imported terminology and what plane horizons means to 56 is 10 or 94, or even a Roe v. Wade of abortion adoption, kind of like 94 between biblical terminology of like a spirit of adoption, which is my thing about the symbolic representation on the backside of the U.S. dollar in the New Compass. Spirit of Adoption is a King James Version Bible, and alphanumeric 206 immediately like a Brazoria country, Brazoria County, and it's kind of like you probably have enough English to know that when you see the P, it's not always pronounced like in psychology. You see the P but you don't hear it. It's like automatically between the county and the country. It's just something of a principle that it's like you automatically know. The difference between the county and country is R, although it's still pronounced both times when it's used. It's still a principle that maybe integrating principle in the way, and it's still that. Anyway, whatever. Really not whatever, but yeah. Anyway, so like it's like an alphanumeric 206 and a spirit of adoption thing. Biblical terminology is compared to some spiritually valued. And I mentioned before, if it's really like a telepathic birth, that would give similarities of what has been identified. Some in anatomy. How true it is about when identical twins are actually starting to form during fertility, and being time lapsed and sped up to where it actually shows it as one, then it actually like divides into two. Yeah, something of that, and likewise in a way of that and as compared to that. Anyway, so I'm going to get back to the symbolic side of the horizontal and the vertical, and something Japanese in 71 in Pearland, and the columns. I mean, when I look at Japanese, it looks more symbolic than like letters. Although there's only like 22 as far as I know. So in any case, yeah, so like this is going on 42 minutes. I'm fixing to take a break here. Anyway, so I'm looking at that as like the field scope and range in a way, or the aim high Air Force thing. What is the halo side? I call it the halo side of that symbolic representation. And I haven't actually gone beyond the horizontal EE, the Texas instrument, beyond the calculus 92, drummer Pentagon, a mayor, a future thing of 92, in that way of going beyond the calculus and programmable mode of a Texas Instruments calculator that shows the EE when it's beyond the program for that particular calculator involving its limit calculus. Yeah. So that was something I was like aware of, and it just didn't have significance. Although I knew it. It's amazing. Someone told me that, and it did. I mean, it's coming more and more significant. And I mean, like it right now. That long ago, I remember that happening. Someone just like out of the clear blue sky. I mean, wasn't even part of the conversation. Hey Wade, man. The guy told me, hey Wade, believe me, really you do. And it's like now it's kind of like, wow, yeah, it's amazing. It's ridiculously not funny. And I'm sure like a lot of people, when they start looking at everything they've ever known and or discovering a lot about, and like really, what it really means, and making something of it, it's like phenomenally, like it's really cool, really, in a way. And I'm working on a lot of stuff that as far as like writing songs and making music videos and stuff like that. A lot of this information will be part of it. And anyway, yeah, so the quadrants in that halo side of the symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1 bill, anything beyond that horizontal EE, which is the halo side, knowing that something about the calculator and programmable modes being a 0E and joined together, it looks like that symbolic representation, and that already being that, and something excelling up above to more advanced of calculus being the EE. Okay, so it's like a 58 and 59, but the vertical seems to be the thing beyond the US dollar, for the mere sake of symbolic representation. And really, for someone who doesn't read or speak Japanese, it looks symbolic to me, not necessarily what the English alphabet looks to me like. Me finding the Japanese that read and write that vertically, seeing it like an alphabet, I mean, it's kind of like harder for me to see them like as a fluent speaker and writer of Japanese, possibly like looking at it more of a symbolic way than an alphabetical way. But me, it's kind of like, do they really consider that like an alphabet? It looks more symbolic to me. Well, right now, that's exactly what it is. And it seems to be like so it right now to something about the field, scope, and range of law, and like citing, quoting, annotation. What's really involved if jurisprudence and other factors of constitutional law in the way of even codes, United States codes annotated. I mean, sometimes, the degree, when practiced within its own description and position, and not involved with a circuit or, integrating degrees in a circuit, if it's really not practiced that way, a lot of the meaning and how law is really used, it's phenomenally the naivety of even a degree thinking that they know everything there is to know. And truthfully, within description and position, maybe absolutely so. But it's like when all those degrees, coordinate a circuit and integrate, I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's like everything you've ever known is not the way it is kind of thing. It's kind of like really not funny. It's like, hey, that's for real serious, yeah. So anyway, I just like looking at it that way. And I've been spending a lot of time, just sitting around thinking about it, and trying to get in the mood to where I can at least, maybe practice my drums for a little while. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna take a break here, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm thinking about maybe if the value is gonna be just another, from like the symbolic alphanumeric value of 58 going to 59, Highway 59, one of the oldest United States of America national landmarks of Highway 59, or the alphanumeric 140, Pearland, Texas, alphanumerics, yay, Holy Miracles and all that good stuff. If that vertical line is going to mean more than just one, in that way, for the implication of symbolic representation, knowing that from up to down, I just know that 71 in Pearland, and something about reading that might include what an acronym is, maybe to even a different value, even with international banking systems, in the way of what exchange commission means, in the way of using other countries' monies at a lower rate to get a better price, and then exchanging it and translating it and making a considerable amount more in the way of doing things like that. Yeah. So or what the federal open market window means to the discount window and all that stuff about the Federal Reserve banks and certain factors of importing and exporting, international importing and exporting at the New York Stock Exchange. What all that means to commercial paper. It seems to be like a real big deal with like television, what commercial paper really means in programming, with what's available in the viewing, listening, television and radio viewing and listening area. So anyway, I'm going to take a break right here and tell you, alright, there it is.